90% of people trying to do whatever they can to get into that 10%. So it's not like a 90-10 in status. It's everybody in that 90% figuring away, how do I get into that 10%? And you have those 10% people who are sitting there paranoid. Somehow I have to remain in this 10%, because if I don't innovate, if I don't change, if I don't create something new, I'm going to be slotted back in the 90% and all my value is gone. Now, for me, within the context of an organization, and since the topic is about organization, organizational cultures, I'm going to try to keep it within the organization systems and culture. Innovation to me, and every time somebody says innovation or entrepreneurship or cloud or any of these buzzwords, push back. Ask them, what does that mean to you? Because what innovation might mean to me might mean something very different to somebody. And if they can't explain what they're talking about and they use more buzzwords around it, you know that they just woke up in the morning, wrote it on a speech, and don't know what they're talking about. But for us, innovation is a byproduct. It's a product of a great process and culture, right? Innovation happens when you have a great process and culture within an organization, and it is as a byproduct. Now, processes in many ways start to define organizations, and processes create culture, and culture creates processes. So I don't want you to think of these as two different things, but rather than a nice cyclical wheel that influences both. I asked one time, how do you know what is an organization culture? And it's a very interesting dipstick a mentor of mine once told me. He said, call up somebody in the organization at any level and ask them, what does it take to succeed in this organization? And whatever they tell you, that's the organization culture. It's not their fancy mission, value statement, it's not the PR stuff, it's not beautiful videos on the screen, but it's what the last person in the organization tells you, that this is what it takes to succeed in this organization. That is the actual culture. So in the concept of innovation in organizations, if you phone that friend who's working in an organization, and if he hasn't talked about innovating to succeed, it's not part of the organization culture. Now, in 2006, we drank the Kool-Aid as the Apeejay Stya Svrán Group on design think. And I know in 2017, everybody's talking about design think, and it's become another buzzword, and everybody is rebranding whatever they did earlier and now calling it design think. But for us, design think was a very simple thing. Is that you have a particular challenge or a problem, and you run a disciplined process in order to solve this. When you run that disciplined process to solve it with an attitude of being diverse, open, experimental, willing to iterate, is then that results in innovation. So for us, the creation of an innovation culture starts, for an organization again, not for an individual, it starts by defining what you want to do. I see a lot of entrepreneurs who I mentor and advise say, oh, we want to be innovative. I ask them why, and they don't have an answer. Oh, because we need to change. Oh, because we need something new. Oh, no. You have to, as an organization, you have to have a defined challenge, problem, place you want to go, thing you want to accomplish, and derive your process and culture from that, and then innovate to succeed at that. Now, this could be as simple as saying, hey, I want to make $1 billion, and I have to find an innovative solution to something, but at least that's your goal. You're trying to make $1 billion. You have to have a defined goal in mind. Only that's where you can innovate. Innovation for the sake of innovation is brainstorming. It's fun. It's nice. But it's not something that an organization should be doing as part of its culture. Now, I want to very briefly take you through sort of the two extremes of organizations. You know, when you look at organization design, what is the purpose of an organization design? A culture, a hierarchy, a system. Organizations exist primarily to allow stakeholders, and that could be managers, professors, students, parents, anyway, to use the organization to accomplish a certain specific goals and objectives. The structure of an organization, the culture of an organization exists to do something. Yes, we do have organizations who exist, and some people will say, I can name 5 government departments that just seem to exist without doing anything, but they were supposed to do something. That was the entire mission to do it, is to get a bunch of people together, put them in a space, put them in a hierarchy, put them in a process to accomplish something. But when you look at organizations, you can design them in very different ways. So If somebody comes up and says, I have the perfect organizational structure to create innovation, to create process, that's wrong. An organization hierarchy and design and process has to be as unique to your organization in terms of what you're trying to accomplish, the local context you're in, and how does the external environment perform. Having an organization culture that you import or copy from somewhere else is not going to work for you. Now, I want to look at two extremes of what levels of innovational culture in organization are. The very basics. Now, if you look historically, and the chairman of the ICT was here. Is he still in the audience? Yes, thank God. I love the organizations like the EICT. To me, they represent the old way of doing something, where you had an organization which was committed to execution. The existence of the organization was to take a strategy, an idea, or a system from top and drive it down, beautiful, executed down to the end product and line. This is a lot of what organizations are doing, that they wait for the top end, at the strategic level, the R&D level, historically, to do this, to come up with the new ideas, come up with an internship or a 3-week induction period, as the chairman said, and then force everybody down the line to adopt it because they don't have faith in the ability of the organization and teams there to innovate. They feel that they have to bring it top down. And this is what's been organizational strategy for pretty much the last 300 to 400 years. Some would argue, for in some cases, 1,000 years plus. But even if you still do this, there's still a difference between an organization who can adapt to that change faster or not. There is a notion of organization change shock. How many of you have experienced change shock? Seriously? No one has experienced change? When your organization keeps changing something every 3 months, 6 months, and then at some point, everybody has, suddenly the organization looks like this. We can't change anymore. You've done so many new things that we don't know where we stand. And part of the first goal of creating an innovation culture is to start absorbing change. Even if people in the organization are not being innovative, they should be open to absorbing change, whether it comes from outside, top down, horizontal, vertical, however. Goal 1, can you take that organizational shock, recovery period, from the average of 3 years, which most organizations used to have, down to 3 months? That can an organization absorb innovative things, grab it, use it, build it into its culture and DNA, and then say, okay, spend 3 months recovery period, now let's go on do it. In organization theory, there is a notion of killing the patient by doing too much and the body doesn't have time to adjust and absorb. Now, the other extreme change, and this is what most organizations want to be, this is sort of the ideal organization where you have innovation and change happening at the level. And this happens because of time. You cannot wait for a centralized managing planning committee sitting somewhere to adjust to a market change. You cannot adjust to something that if you're running an education organization, what a student needs in the classroom today, what market forces are telling you on that side, you cannot wait for a central people of 10 people to meet twice a year to create that change, to take the thing. You need your frontline people to find a solution today, and you need to innovate that today. But I'll tell you what that looks like for a lot of organizations. Can you imagine an airplane, right? Airplane is flying. Now, there are teams which are assigned to every part of the airplane. One each for the engines, the wings, the cockpit, the controls, the cargo bay doors, everything. And you're asking them, start changing stuff to respond to what's happening while the plane is flying. What happens when you do that really well? You get an extremely high-performance machinery in the air which is able to accomplish amazing things. What happens when one of them gets things wrong? Right? So if you're trying to create innovative, high-performance organizations as part of your process and culture, do note, at the very extreme, this is a high-performing, high-precision organization. You need to be prepared to take the risk to understand that by change and innovation, risk is built in, and you need to have robust processes in order to absorb that risk. Otherwise, you're going to crash the plane. For most organizations, you will find that a nice, healthy point is somewhere in the middle between the command and control hierarchy of innovation and between the extreme, everybody's changing everything while the plane is flying. I have 5 minutes left, and so I'm going to leave you with 3 simple, powerful concepts, which for us was very useful to just start organizations to ask the right questions. And there's 3 questions which we say everyone should ask. The first one is obviously, is why? A lot of people don't stop to ask why. And during induction programs into one of our companies, and we operate around 7 different segments across almost every city in India. We have about 5,000 people, and we hire about 500 every year right now. And the number one thing we tell them is that if somebody tells you to do something, and ask them why. Why do we do it this way? Please tell me the logic and reason, because as organizations grow, as cultures grow, one of the craziest things that happen is people forget why we want to do something in a particular way. So starting with asking why is a great start to saying that, okay, I need to understand how it's done so I can do it better. The second question, which is really obvious, why not? Why do we do something this way? And but why not that way, or that way, or that way? And we have a policy that says that you need to find that answer. If a senior management person or a junior management person cannot give you an answer why and why not, something is wrong with the policy, something's wrong with the process, something is wrong with the system, because somebody hasn't put in the thought of doing this in a better way. And the last part, how many of you have seen improv theater? Improv, yes. How many of you have been in improv theater as an amateur or professional? Yeah, a couple of people. Improv, and I love improv, and I think every entrepreneur and every business student and everybody should be forced to go through an improv course before they graduate. And that is because of a simple concept called yes and. So once you've asked why, and you've asked why not, the next step in your culture, which is really important, is the positivity of yes and, which means if somebody has an idea, if somebody has a theory, if somebody wants to try something, don't say why or why not there. Start with yes. And so you're always building on things. The biggest ridiculous thing that the notion that has come in the last 100 years is this notion of the individual entrepreneur, the eureka idea, the notion that one person sitting in a bathroom having a shower solved world's problems. No. For organizations to have an innovative executive culture, it has to be people who have iterated and built on ideas. And yes and is a powerful way to tell people that all ideas are welcome as long as they survive your entrepreneurial process. The last thought I'm going to leave you with this. How many of you here in your organizations feel you have a defined process which leads to innovation? Very few. And this is something that we should all think about. And the other question I would ask to the people who raise their hand is that if I went to a middle management person in your organization and asked the same question, would they be able to tell me exactly what you would have said if when I asked you this question, what is your innovation process? And there are a couple of hands, right? But this is what we need for all of our organizations, and this is what it means to have an innovation culture, is that it's in the DNA that the last person standing from the front line to the back line is in alignment with how this happens. Thank you very much. It was great speaking to you all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Berlia. And opportunity to invite on the dais Professor Gaffo, Associate Dean of Global and Executive MBA, IE Business School, Spain. Let's all welcome Professor on.
Can project the slides, please? Okay, so good morning to everybody. It's a pleasure to